What's up, you guys? Steven here for Off the Shelf Movie Night to talk to you about physical media, about Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs, the way we like to buy and own our movies and TV shows and collect them in a beautiful library and watch them at our leisure and not worry about them disappearing from some streaming service. If you're a physical media collector, you want to be a physical media collector, or you just want to talk about movies, you're in a good spot. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and be updated when my new posts are out. And if you like what you see, a like and a share is always hugely appreciated. It gets the word out about what we're doing here. So I recently did a video about upgrading from DVD to Blu-ray to 4K and some of the reasons why, how you want to determine whether you should or shouldn't upgrade. Mostly that video focused on moving from DVD to 4K, which is a big jump. And I think I want to go back and talk about this some more. I want to answer some questions that I have from that previous video and try to give you a little bit more information on upgrading and how I feel it's important. And I think I'm going to do a new series too. I'm going to call it Should I Upgrade? And if you hit me in the comments with one that you're thinking about, I'll take a look at it and I'll tell you. I'll answer the question. I'll give you the receipts about why or why not. Because there are some reasons you might not upgrade. So as I said, mostly I talked about moving from DVD all the way up to 4K and what the differences were. To just sort of synopsize it really quickly, moving from DVD to 4K, you get, are just simply moving from DVD to Blu-ray, you're getting 4 times the image quality. You're getting less compression, and that's something I want to talk about a little bit more moving forward. I don't think I really talked about the compression issues enough. You're getting a lot less compression. So the image and sound are going to be better. The discs are larger capacity-wise, so they can hold a lot more when you're talking about bonus features. And being able to hold a lot more means less compression on the video. So when we're talking about compression, the raw Blu-ray file, let's talk about Blu-ray, moving from DVD to Blu-ray. The raw file is big, and they have to use a compression tool to squish it down to make sure that it fits. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the super technical stuff because then we get into bit rate. The bit rate of the compression, the higher the bit rate, the less the compression, the better quality the images. We can do that if you really want to, because that's where we see a lot of differences in 1080p streaming versus a 1080p disc, or 1080p 4K versus, 1080p 4K, or 4K streaming versus a 4K disc. You can have technically the same number of lines of resolution to count as 1080p or to count as 4K. It's just talking about the lines of resolution on the screen, how many pixels. But the bit rate, imagine a pipe, and a pipe is a bit rate. That's the compression. So the wider the pipe, the more easily that image can flow through that pipe. To stream stuff in 1080p or 4K and keep it moving fast, streamers have to up that compression, squish that pipe down, make that file as small as they can possibly make it so that you can handle downloading it across the internet. Now, the other thing is, they may brag about having a nice wide pipe, but they don't have that nice wide pipe all the time. Because it's 7 o'clock at night, on a Friday night, there's a lot of people streaming movies. Families get together, they're watching movies, whatever. And the more the system is being used, the more they have to tighten up that pipe to make room for more pipes. Even if you've got a nice, fast connection, which I do, and my Netflix in particular is the worst about it. Netflix and HBO Max are both really bad. They buffer a lot. And buffering means they're loading a lot of that information into the queue, so then you can then be watching it while it's continuing to download the video you're watching in the background. I know I didn't mean to get into streaming too much, but I just feel like everyone's, why not stream? There's a lot of issues with streaming. So when that pipe gets smaller, things get crushed. Black levels, in particular, take a beating under high compression. And that's one thing you're going to notice moving from DVD to Blu-ray. You'll look at areas in the image that are supposed to be black, and they're going to look digitally grainy. There's a difference between digital grain and organic film grain. Digital grain is very pixely. It's going to look that way in the black areas, and things are going to look more gray. And if there were details in that black area, say someone's standing in the shadows, you might not be able to see the details that were there. Maybe the creases in the jacket they're wearing, or the facial details. Things like that are going to disappear into that gray, murky area because the compression is crushing all of it down. The pixels are still coming through, but they're getting smashed flat, right? Like a pancake. So when you move from DVD to Blu-ray, that pipe opens up. So not only are you getting more pixels, literally, you're getting the 1080p 360 versus 1080p, it's a big jump, but you're getting a nice wider pipe. Now imagine when you move from Blu-ray to 4K, that pipe again doubles. So the bitrate is higher on a good 4K. There's some bad ones. The pipe is wider so that new data can flow much faster and more freely, and you again have doubled the data. Now, as we talked about previously, the 4K also brings in, with the larger capacity of the disc, the ability to have HDR, to have that wider dynamic color. So that hopefully that helps explain a little bit further some of the more minute stuff, because we didn't really even talk about compression. And compression is huge because you can look, the initial Blu-rays that came out had a much narrower pipe than they do now. The compression tools have been better refined. This always happens with a new media format, always happens with technology. The more these companies create these discs, the better they get at handling compression. And a lot of times now with the boutique distributors, I love this about them, especially with 4K. In order to keep that compression as light as possible, keep that pipe as big and open as they can, they'll move all the bonus features to a second disc, so that all you have on that 4K is the movie and the audio options and maybe a commentary, and then you have to go to the other disc for the extras. I'm fine with that. Give me the highest bit rate you can give me. Now, that said, you're going to see all that stuff start to move back to the 4K disc because they're going to get better and better at handling the compression. I think an example is a UK company I like a lot called Second Sight. They were doing this a lot. You would get the 4K on its own disc and then all the extras on the Blu-ray, where you're starting to see those extras in their newer releases move from that Blu-ray back to the 4K because they're refining their capabilities. And sometimes it depends on the length of the movie too, because the longer the movie, the bigger the file size is going to be. So I want to talk about some specific questions that were posted in the previous video and see if I can help answer some of them. Okay, let's see. Oh, okay, so Blu-ray Addict mentions black and white. So let's see, I got one here for you. People don't think about black and white being able to take advantage of the wider color gamut, the HDR. I've got this one right here, arguably one of the best. I hear Casablanca is very good. This one just seemed timely. It's a Wonderful Life as I'm recording this video from Paramount. Now, what happens with HDR, for example? So this takes all advantage of all the other things that we've talked about. You get the additional lines of resolution going into 4K. You get a nice big fat pipe, low compression, so the bit rate is pretty high, so the image is not compressed. And when you're talking about, basically it's kind of like music. You know, when you listen to digital music versus analog music, what happens, they compress the music, and a lot of times the high end and the low end get scraped away in order to compress it all down. It's very mid-rangey. As long as we've been doing digital music, it's still kind of that way. The quality is much better than it used to be, but it still kind of is that way a little bit. And we notice it less and less because we're using earbuds most of the time, and those, even the nicest earbuds, can only reproduce so much dynamic range musically. You know, Cups headphones, they have a bigger speaker, they can do it a little better. But anyway, it's a whole different thing. But it happens with movies too. So you're compressing the low end, it's getting more gray and details getting crushed. Same with the high end. my cat, you guys. So we have construction people outside working, and my cat is losing his mind. So we'll do the best we can to ignore it. So this is what happens with movies, too. I totally got distracted. So they're very mid-rangey, right? Well, when you're talking about a black and white film that's black and white, if you start crushing the black levels in compression, black and white movies are going to look, really kind of bad. Black and white movies, TV shows, whatever. Remember, they're shot on 35 millimeter film, so they have the capability of bringing us that full 4K resolution. So when you add the ability to have HDR on one of these movies, how does it... So we've dealt with the compression issue. So blacks are black, and high-end images are not as blown out looking. The details have come back. Someone standing in the shadows, you can suddenly see the buttons on their jacket. Someone is standing in bright light, especially someone who's like, shaved head like me, the top of their head comes back because it's not blown out in the image anymore, right? So we have that. So what does HDR do? So when you're talking about something that was shot on film particularly, on digital too, but mostly when you're talking about that, everything is not just black and white. It's a gradient because it's shot organically. It's a chemical reaction that causes the image to be what it is. So it's, deep black, kind of mid black, gray, light gray, then, different layers of white. Those things disappear. Those things just disappear in standard compression sometimes. You get a much more aggressive black or white image. Well, all of a sudden the gradient comes back. You might have shadows that are black, and then you have a dark gray, someone in a dark gray suit, but then their shirt is not actually white. It was a lighter color of gray. Those things come back. In hair, if you have someone who has kind of salt and pepper in their hair and a color, that salt and pepper comes back. It's not just black or white. So absolutely, HDR can offer an epic improvement for black and white films. I highly recommend, even if you don't like this movie, I'm not the biggest fan of this movie. It's kind of nice to have it around during the holidays. But what I love about this one is the bonus feature on here shows the restoration of the film. There's a whole documentary on here about how the film was restored and brought to 4K. You will learn a lot about that process by looking at this extra. Okay, let's see what else we've got going on here. And that was from Blu-ray Addict. Let's see. Oh, okay, so I want to talk about something from Adon. He says, he doesn't have an extra media room with an 11-speaker system, and he has bad vision. Okay, I understand that, but if you have a 4K TV, you will still get a lot of advantage. You will get that HDR color, you will get the higher resolution, all the detail. You will still be able to take a huge advantage of the 4K or even moving from DVD to Blu-ray. And he mentions that he has a vision impairment. Me too. I am legally blind. So my response to that is, if you have trouble seeing the image already, the better the image is on screen, the more likely you are to see just a little bit more. And I don't know, if you're like me, I want to see as much as I can possibly see with my limited capabilities. So I see the difference. Things pop into my visual world that weren't there before by the upgrade. So there's still an advantage. There's other reasons you just maybe don't want to, you don't care that much. I get it. I got you. But I'm just saying, you can't let your vision impairment be a limiting factor, because actually, if you have a vision impairment, having the best possible image on screen is going to allow you to see a little bit more than you saw before. Thank you, all of you guys, for commenting. Let's see. Okay, so he also asked me, he says, can you explain this for me? I've been watching he's been watching the Harry Potter, which one? He mentions one in particular, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. He said for the first time, let's see, he upgraded the DVDs. And for the first time, whoops, what did you upgrade the DVDs from? He can see the CGI. And he doesn't understand why he can see the CGI now. Now, did you upgrade to to Blu-ray. Okay, he went from DVD to Blu-ray. Okay, so, Adon, this is for you. Talking about these movies. When CGI is created, so you're shooting an image with your camera, and it records at whatever resolution the film was shot in. And in the case of this movie, being shot in the early 2000s where film was still being used, it was shot on Super 35. So the image is literally going to be capable of going 4K. But the visual effects, at that time we were still rendering visual effects in 2K, and that seemed so advanced. So basically 2K, you're talking about slightly better than Blu-ray quality. So when you watch this movie on DVD, you're taking that huge image, that huge detail, all the stuff that was shot on 35 and squishing it down to a DVD. And you're talking about a 360p image, 360 image, but your special effects were shot at slightly better than 1080p, and they're again squished down to DVD. So all of this compression, as I mentioned earlier, it's compressed down into a very tiny pipe to be pushed from the disc to your TV. So everything gets soft. Edges are slightly softer. Grain is a little heavier. Digital grain is heavier. Plus you've got film grain. And all of that sort of softens the edges of CGI. Actually does it a service. It blends it a little bit more because everything is a little bit softer in focus just because it's hazier. It's compressed more. Well, when you move from DVD to Blu-ray to 1080p, okay, so the image is going to clear up because you've opened up that compression pipe. So the highs are back in place. Everything that was happening in the upper register of the image is back. Details come back. The black levels become a little more black, a little less gray. Not perfect, but they come back a little bit. And now we're hitting 1080p. We're right at the level that the CGI was created. So suddenly that CGI, the edges of those lightning bolts and different CGI effects become a little more crisp. So it stands out more. And this is the reason that I talk about practical effects over CGI, because CGI does not stand the test of time. So you can only imagine if you move to 4K, well, that the base image, the filmed stuff, the practical things that were taken in by the lens of the camera is going to be gorgeous. And I have this set in 4K. It's a very nice 4K. Black levels become black, but retain details in those black levels. High-end, the upper register of the image remains heavy in detail, but doesn't look like it's shining a flashlight in your face. It's the correct level of brightness. But then all of a sudden, the image is of a higher quality than the special effects, so they have to be upscaled. And we talked about upscaling in the previous video, where it's a software tool that creates pixels that seem to be the same or a reasonable expansion of what was originally the source of the image. So it's guessing, and it does a pretty good job at guessing. But then all of a sudden, the crisp special effects go a little bit softer again. So it might even be, if you look at it that way, the 4K might even be an advantage because it softens the effects, because they lose focus a little bit. They become softer. But that's what it is. You are seeing the effects at a closer version of what they probably saw in the theater, because that DVD was taking advantage of everything being soft and out of focus because of the compression that was applied to that disc. So that's why you're suddenly seeing the CGI more. It's standing out to you more because the quality of the overall image is catching up to where and hitting a wall as far as the level of quality able to be obtained by the special effects. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, let me know. I'll talk about it more in the next video that I do about this. So let me see. Someone else mentioned something that I think is actually pertinent to this aspect of the conversation. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So Eva H says that even you have the other side of the coin, or of this 4K. Is it worth 4K over standard Blu-ray? And if not, why? Typically, I find myself asking questions with Disney releases. Okay, Eva, you are correct. I agree with you on Disney releases. Disney releases are worth thinking about, not rather than just jumping in and buying them, because of what we're talking about. Disney releases, Marvel releases in particular, anything that's got a lot of CGI effects in it. Because let's talk about the Marvel movies. Up until recently, all the Marvel movies, the special effects elements of those movies are going to have the same issue that we just talked about with the Harry Potter movie. All the CGI work is rendered in 2K. That's the best it's ever going to look. It wasn't done organically on film, so there's not hidden image quality that we can tap into when we go to a 4K. It just hits a ceiling. It's ones and zeros. It's digital. So if it was done in 2K, it's 2K, and that's it. So when you talk about something heavy, with heavy CGI, like a superhero movie, all the effects are in 2K. So typically what Disney does is just upscales the whole thing. And they're also all shot digitally. They're not shot on film. So again, you're hitting a quality wall. So everything that happens above the Blu-ray into that 4K is pretty much just the upscaling tools, adding pixels to make it look better. Now, I will say that I have seen some improvement in some Marvel movies when it comes to HDR, because just having less compression, when you're talking about anything shot digitally is compressed. That's just the nature of digital shooting. So you add another layer of compression on top of that disc. If you could take that layer away or expand it, let that digital image flow freely without chopping off the high end and the low end. Remember, when we compress, that's what happens. We take off the black levels and we cut off the high end. We can at least get some improvement there. So that is what you typically see. There are always exceptions. You see a little bit better black levels. You see a little bit better on the high end, the brighter notes, and the CGI, again, any CGI on screen is all upscaled. So I think for the most part, Disney 4Ks look mediocre. And I agree with your point in the rest of your post about how Disney doesn't seem to take care on their 4Ks. They don't take it that seriously. I agree. They just upscale stuff. You know, you look at the Star Wars movies, people lost their minds over the original trilogy when it came out, and I looked at it and I was highly disappointed. I think, to me, the image is much more washed out than it should be, pretty much across the board on those movies. Now, what I will say is the Blu-rays changed the laser blaster colors for some reason to magenta. The 4Ks fix that. So to me, if you're a hardcore fan, that's worth the upgrade. But I also find, especially Star Wars, the first one, I find it to be dimmer than it should be. And that is a problem with early 4Ks. Figuring out how to implement all this new color information was a challenge for authors, and movies would come out with much more dynamic color, much more gradient, but they would be overall darker. So, yeah, I agree with you on the Disney movies. I think Disney movies are they're pretty mid to lower in the quality of 4K. They don't take the time and put the love into that transfer the way Paramount or Sony, my two favorites. Sony does amazing 4Ks. Paramount does very solid 4Ks also. And when you've got all this new information to deal with in the authoring of a new movie, my camera just dimmed a little bit there, so I freaked out for a second. So when you've got all this new information, you've got to take time to interpret that information and implement it correctly. And Disney doesn't do it. If you have all the Marvel movies in Blu-ray, I don't think you have to upgrade. They're just upscales. Now, some of the Phase 4 movies, I think Doctor Strange was probably shot better. I'd have to go and look, but Sam Raimi behind the camera, I would assume that they probably went 4K on the special effects. I'm not sure, because their window of time for creating these movies is so tight. It's so tight. And when you start rendering all your effects in 4K, then it takes up a lot more storage space, takes a lot longer to render, all that stuff. So I don't know. I have to check that one. If you really want to know, I'll take a look and see. Let me see if there's anything else specifically in here I need to answer. Yeah, I think that pretty much gets it. But if there's a movie you're thinking of upgrading, you don't know whether you should, that collector instinct in us makes us want to have the newest, best release. You don't always have to, but also there are some bad 4Ks out there. There are a few. The worst 4K in my collection is the Terminator 2. Some filmmakers, James Cameron in particular, early on did this. They want to use digital noise reduction because they're looking at the film grain. But the fact is, when you shot on film, that film grain should be in place. It's part of the organic presentation of the image. And he used a lot of DNR on the Terminator movie, so now people's faces look kind of waxy. They don't look real. They look like dolls almost. And he did some weird stuff with the color. I don't understand. I think we'll eventually get a new presentation of that movie because it looks like hot garbage. So it is important, to look at some 4Ks, especially if they're expensive, before you just go out and buy it. Look at some reviews and, or come to me, and ask me. I'll tell you. I'll look into it for you and tell you if it's worth an upgrade. So let's do that. I want to start that. I'll let them compile after I've got 5, 6, 7, 8 movies. And I'll post occasionally in the community tab here and just ask, is there a movie you're thinking about upgrading to Blu-ray or upgrading to 4K, and you want to know if it's worth the upgrade? I'll tell you, because this is a subject I love. I've got a couple of other movies I just wanted to reference here, because we talked about different genres. People think that action movies, science fiction movies are only worth 4K upgrades. Anything shot on film can gain a lot of image quality boost from a 4K presentation. And, a lot of things shot digitally. Portrait of a Lady on Fire was shot in 8K. I haven't seen that movie, but I want to see it because of that. It was shot in 8K. So that source material is double the quality of any 4K disc that you can get. So when it steps down to 4K for a release, it should look incredible because it has so much more data in its visual image than the 4K disc even needs. It should be beautiful. I don't know if there's a 4K of that movie yet. I'm kind of waiting for that to happen. But yeah, so things are happening, even in the digital space. But people are still shooting in film. There are still some filmmakers that like to shoot in film. The Fabelmans from Steven Spielberg, that's out as I record this in theater on a limited release, I think. It's shot on 35. It should make a beautiful 4K. So I wanted to bring this one to your attention, Crash. This is a David Cronenberg film, shot on film in the 80s. I think 80s, maybe early 90s. I have to look. This 4K is beautiful. A big majority of this movie is shot at night, or it's kind of noir style, so it's in the dark. Things happen in the shadows. This is a huge improvement. No action here. This is mostly suspense kind of drama. No action here. But the black levels in this movie are crucial, and if you compare this to the Blu-ray or a DVD, you will see this is a beautiful presentation. No action, no science fiction there. And then this one, I just thought I would pull this one off the shelf too, since I was sitting there. It's Cloak and Dagger, kind of an action movie from the 80s, but not really. It's a kids movie, kind of. This kid becomes involved in a spy thriller conspiracy. So it's not big action. It's mostly just a kid running for some dudes. But the color improvement here, the reds are popping. He wears a red jacket, and it really pops on the screen. The film grain remains intact here. This, I don't know that this would be my demo disc, my go-to disc for demonstrating the 4K improvement, but over the DVDs that have been out before, this is stunning. Now, if you want to talk about upscales that look really good, the two upscaled movies that I would say are wonderful examples of how good upscaling can still really impact a 4K presentation is Blade Runner 2049. That one is the 4K is a 2K upscale, and I think that's because there's so much CG in it, and all that CG was rendered in 2K, so they wanted to just a new scan would not be beneficial to the CGI, as we talked about. It would look cheaper, so they put out a beautiful low compression 4K that had a lot of attention given to the HDR, so the color is a huge improvement over the Blu-ray. Beautiful 4K upscale. A lot of people won't even be able to tell that it's a 4K upscale. And Mad Max Fury Road. A lot of practical effects in that one. So that even though it's a 4K upscale, some of the details in the darker areas of that image do pop, and the HDR is quite stunning. So there are examples of good upscales. My focus usually is how the film was filmed and then how it was scanned. If something was filmed on 35 millimeter, but then scanned into digital at 2K, well, you're still going to get upscales. And you buy a 4K, you're still getting a 2K upscale, unless they went back for the restoration and rescanned it in full 4K. So these things matter, and that's how you're going to know if you're really getting that benefit. So let me know what you think. Let's keep the conversation going. Till next we meet, pull something cool off the shelf, share it with your friends and family, and remind them why physical media is the best way to watch films on TV at home. Follow me on TikTok. Follow me on Letterboxd, OTS Movies on both platforms. Till next we meet, watch something cool. I'll see you soon.